Thank you, everyone. This is a talk somewhat from a 50,000 foot elevation view. The question I want to ask today is, where does data science fit in a liberal arts university? And if you were here in the morning at the beginning, you'll recognize that some of my themes touch on those that were touched on in the exchange between Ambush Sinj and Dean Wiltzius about the structure and organization by which data science emerges sort of bottom up on a campus like ours. So where does data science fit in a liberal arts university is my ultimate question. And the question that might get us there to start with is to ask, where is data science now? A good partial data set, merely a proxy at the current time, is that of the Open Syllabus project. If you don't know it, they have about, that figure is now obsolete, over 9 million syllabi collected from around the world in the English language from 140 different countries. I'll show you it very quickly. This is a co-citation graph. Let me see if I can get to the browser window. It's really quite an interesting resource to explore. You can dive in, almost intensive zooming to different books that are co-assigned in the same syllabi. So this is a co-citation graph. And as you'll see, go back to my main PowerPoint slide. If you search for the words data science in the titles of works, essays, and books that are co-assigned together, you find a graph that looks very much like this. And the obvious locations are there in the lower quadrant at the right. Physics, chem, STEM, biology, computer science, information science. And then at the northwest, a little bit surprisingly to me anyway, sports and education, although not a surprise in our education school here. Where is data science not, generally speaking? It's not in the humanities and the social sciences. So that probably is not a surprise either. Given that situation of where data science is, where should data science be in a liberal arts university? That's my ultimate question today. And to answer that question, I think we need to think about what we understand data science to be in comparison or in juxtaposition to what we think the liberal arts are as systems of knowledge. In that regard, my emphasis in thinking about data science here is not on the data part of the phrase, that's what most of us concentrate on at this summit, but on the science part of the phrase, which we really have to understand not just in, although certainly in its narrower sense of the STEM sciences, but science in its etymological sense of knowledge, and of course in an educational institution also learning. My question is, how does data science as a system of knowledge mesh up with, juxtapose itself to, can fit into liberal arts as a system of knowledge? Where the liberal arts, of course, derive from classical times through the Middle Ages as the artes liberales, the 7 liberal arts, Studia Liberalia, and descend all the way to especially the American system of higher education. You see that our College of Letters and Science here promises a comprehensive liberal arts education. There's much more to be said about that story. There are interesting interventions early in the 20th century at Yale, at Harvard, then at Johns Hopkins and others. The Cold War and Sputnik had a role in this, but the story, very briefly, is that we are a liberal arts institution. That is what we understand knowledge to be. The liberal arts consisted of the so-called 7 liberal arts, a system of knowledge. And as you saw in the phrase of our college, letters and science, those 7 liberal arts were divided into 2 classes. The trivium, the 3 arts of language pertaining to the mind, logic, grammar, and rhetoric. Roughly speaking, the humanities, but also because to be an orator, to be a thinker was also to be a leader, a governor. That's really the origin of the social sciences as we now understand them to be as well. And then the quadrivium, the 4 arts of quantity pertaining to matter, arithmetic, in an applied way as Pythagoras applied it, music, geometry, and then in the application of the theory of space, astronomy. Now later in my talk, I'm going to be talking about application. It's an important concept here. Here I'll just mention in passing that you see application The applied sciences are built into the traditional notion of the liberal arts, much in the way that STEM builds in a notion of the applied sciences. The TE in STEM, technology and engineering, are framed and embedded very nicely between science and mathematics. They, TE, are the applied core or nugget of that STEM concept, much in the way that music and astronomy are applied knowledges embedded within arithmetic and geometry. So that's, as I said, a system of knowledge. And I emphasize system because it's not a sample, it's not an anthology. You don't pick these miscellaneously. They were picked to be a rounded whole, an encyclical kind of knowledge. The knowledge needed to be a free person. That's what the word liberal in liberal arts mean. Liberal in the sense that this education enabled you to be a free citizen of a state, as opposed to someone who's bound as a servant to serve someone else. So the idea here is that these 7 liberal arts equipped you to be a free thinker, a free citizen of a state. You are not just learning how to do something specific in an applied way to serve somebody else. Other attributes of liberal arts were these. It's called intransitive knowledge versus transitive. So transitive means that the value of the knowledge passes through you to someone else or to some instrumental function. Whereas intransitive means that the benefit of the education collects in you as a human being. It forms you and there's no external function or instrumental goal. Other attributes of liberal arts knowledge, it's supposed to be semantic versus physical. It's conceptual rather than in most cases applied. It's philosophical versus sensuous. And it's formal rather than empirical. All that indeed adds up to a system of knowledge. That's why we think of the well-rounded scholar as someone who has, in an encyclopedic way, become an holder of an encyclical, rounded system of knowledge, both the trivium and the quadrivium, letters and sciences. The fascination to me of the data sciences today is that they are, I don't know how to think about it. Either they are parasitically building themselves on top of the existing liberal arts framework and twisting it and skewing it in their own ways, or they are an emergent competing framework of systematic knowledge, just as ambitious and just as all-embracing as the liberal arts. So I've canvassed a lot of data science programs, their web descriptions online, and this is a very typical structure of a way a program is pitched, advertised to the world. This is the UC Berkeley Data Science major homepage, and you'll see that, of course, there's computation, statistics, mathematics, etc. But then the domain emphases, which encompass human context and ethics. And when you look at the exact number of emphases at Berkeley, they are encyclopedic. So the humanities, arts, philosophy, biology, environment, sociology, social policy, urban science, etc. You see what I mean? This is a system of knowledge coming to be, just as encyclical or encyclopedic as the liberal arts, a kind of competing framework for what a liberal arts university might be. UCSB's Data Science Initiative has the same kind of a sweeping aims. So theories and algorithms, statistics, etc., but also all that exploration and modeling should come across in the sciences, humanities, social sciences, medicine, engineering, economics, and education. I guess if there were more room there in that paragraph, we could have just kept going, because that's the sweepingness of the ambition of the data sciences. The undergrad major that is under proposal, you've already seen this Venn diagram from Alex this morning. This is how the encyclical system is being imagined. At the core, CS, statistics, and math, but then the wings of the program unfold. You can imagine this as a kind of a creature, and the domain emphases flower around them. Eventually, if we have enough support, there will be more than 3 domain emphases. there'd be 15, 16, 17, 18, 20, just as at UC Berkeley. My own course that I taught last winter, and I'm getting ready to teach again in winter coming up, is a kind of a prototype, a kind of a trial experiment for a humanities contribution to the domain emphases in this regard. I teach a course called Data Stories, Theory and Practice of Data-Driven Narratives in the Digital Age. So where does data science fit in a liberal arts university? Meaning, where should it fit in the future? Now remember this graph that Sister Miriam Joseph, in a very good book about the history of the liberal arts, gave us a look at, of the trivium and the quadrivium. The data sciences, as I suggested, are kind of a competing and cyclical framework of knowledge. They sort of fit on top of the existing liberal arts structure, but they sort of don't as well. If you really wanted to find a place on the map, as it were, of the liberal arts on which to pin data science, I guess as a kind of a force fit, I would put it there. Because data science has floated out of and emerged from the STEM sciences to the point where it is encroaching upon the traditional domain of the social sciences and the humanities, that of the trivium. That's why it's so exciting today. And that's why we have, 25 departments or something represented here today. Data science is certainly about the discrete quantity of number, applied, etc., but it's increasingly also a kind of logic of its own, and a grammar, and certainly a rhetoric, and certainly a social force. That's why so often we talk about bias and other terms associated with data today. But nevertheless, pinning it on the map of the liberal arts in that kind of organizational structure, I think is a forced fit. Data science doesn't quite mesh. It's somehow orthogonal to the framework of the liberal arts. And that is because it represents to us in a new way what applied knowledge might be. Applied knowledge has never fit in very well in a liberal arts framework. It's always there. We know that our students want careers, etc. We know that the world needs to be affected by the research that we do, but there are very few ways traditionally in which we can think step by step from the kinds of research theory methods that we engage in to the applied knowledge here. Applied knowledge has always been a kind of a subordinated kind of work at a research university like ours. Applied knowledge is more at home in the STEM sciences, but data science takes applied knowledge and moves it where it's never been before in an R1 university. Think about it. It's now the humanities and the social sciences, for example, and the environmental sciences, the domain emphases, in other words, that are the applied knowledges here. That is very interesting. The liberal arts have become applied from the perspective of data science. So my hope for the future of DS at UCSB, or one of the hopes, is that it could be a way to help us rethink the role of applied knowledges, and the humanities, we say also service knowledges, in knowledge as a system today. Applied knowledge and service knowledge, that's when we say in the humanities, when the humanities serve you in giving you critical skills and thinking skills and communication skills. We don't have a way to bridge between those and critical knowledge, meaning the substantive material of our methods, which we think philosophically and theoretically and formally and methodologically about. We have very few ways to say to the student, look, your critical thinking skills have something real to do with the substance of what we teach you. I think data science is a goad toward imagining what a bridgeway between these two areas might be. So I'll close this way. For that bridge to occur, both kinds of knowledge have to reform each other. Critical knowledge has to take on some of the aspects of applied knowledge, and applied knowledge has to become critical. It has to become critical to the point of being even a counter or alternative kind of knowledge So I close without reading because my monitor is here. Two wonderful works about data science. One is Oski's essay, Counting the Countless, Why Data Science is a Profound Threat for Queer People. And the other is a remarkable essay by Jessica Marie Johnson, Markup Bodies, Black Life Studies and Slavery Death Studies at the Digital Crossroads. Both of them call for alternative, counter-radical data science that offers a new kind of knowledge. I'll close there.